We hear this all the time these days. People are stressed out, they're panicking, they feel like they've missed the boat. But you haven't. You just need the right strategy. So today, we're getting into what you need to know about Edmonton's market and how buyers are still getting into homes. Let's dive into it. One of the biggest things we can talk about right off the bat is price increase. When we look at the last couple of years here, Edmonton has increased around 10% across the board. And when you look at what's happening firsthand, I find that there's a lot of demand and we're not necessarily seeing the inventory to support that. What are you seeing out there?
Same situation. We're out there with buyers all the time, and, it's a battle for every property that, we're trying to go after. There's not a lot of choices for people too. So, instead of getting to look at, 10, 15 homes, buyers are having to kind of look at, 1 to maybe 5 homes max before they're, making a decision, just because there's not enough popping up on the market right now. So yeah, absolutely. The demand is definitely carried over from last year. And, in turn, that obviously continues to push up our prices. As we talked about in our forecasting video, which people can go check out on our channel, this is exactly kind of what they've started to predict at least. And then, it's going to definitely, carry out throughout the year at least.
Oh, for sure. And just kind of adding onto what you were saying, there's just not a lot of options out there, especially in that more affordable range. Like, we're just not seeing the inventory that we'd like. And I also find that if you're not one of the first ones to jump on it, it can almost be too late. One of the biggest fears that we hear all the time is maybe I should just wait it out a little bit longer. Whether it's thinking prices are too high, those rates are too high, people really feel that if they just sit on those sidelines a little bit longer, they might be in a better opportunity. But I don't really think that's the case. When we look at how much out of province demand we're getting from places like BC and Ontario, it's places that really value how much of an affordable city Edmonton really is. And when you look at the math, high demand and low inventory is just going to keep driving up those prices. So sitting on the sidelines is really going to hurt you in the long run.
Absolutely, because if you are just sitting there waiting for those prices to come down, in reality, what you're doing is you're just missing out on, equity that you're building in your home, the appreciation value. If people wait for that drop, historically, real estate always grows. It never, really comes back down. So yes, there are dips and corrections, as we would call them, but a true crash is never really something that we may ever see again. So, sitting around waiting in reality is you're just losing out on money, in my opinion.
Kind of just to add off of that, people really like to kind of think that they're going to buy at a better price, but people also factor in rates as well. Something that we always like to educate buyers with is, you can always refinance a rate, but you can't repurchase your house at a different price. So it's something to keep in mind that while yes, it's nice to have a lower rate, we don't know when that might be. Given what we've been kind of informed at things like the market forecast, it doesn't really seem like we're going to see that much of a drop anyway. So again, trying to sit on the sidelines thinking you might be in a better spot might actually really hurt you in the long run.
And again, too, like with the amount that the rates are changing, like the amount that it really affects your payment is quite minimal. It might be $10 a month, or it might be $100 a month. And in reality, what's that over a year? $1,200, over 5 years, you're, maybe $5,000 to $6,000 kind of thing. Whereas, last year we saw prices go up on homes, nearly 10%. If you're a $300,000 house, that's $30,000 that you just missed out on just because you were worried about paying an extra $100 per month kind of thing. So
for sure,
I think that people get a little bit caught up in kind of some stuff on the news and, worrying about what the rate might be. But the rate is short term, honestly, right? Like you mentioned, when you purchase your house, like that's, more important. As long as you can afford that payment, that extra $100 a month, in reality, I think you're missing out on an opportunity just to try and save a little bit on your monthly payment if you can already afford it.
I think honestly, the mindset, instead of it being as looking at the rate as almost a bit of a con, it should almost be looking at the equity and seeing how much potential there is there. Instead of trying to throw it away for that cheaper rate, it should almost be how much equity I'm possibly losing out on by sitting on the sidelines. Another one of the biggest fears that we hear all the time is, what if I buy that house now and I regret it later? I find that this fear is really driven from cities like Toronto and Vancouver. They see what's happened there and they think, will Edmonton do the same? But it's not the case. Cities like Toronto and Vancouver were driven from hype and not necessarily real demand like we see here. People move here for job opportunities, affordability, and an overall better quality of life. When you look at a city like Toronto and Vancouver, it was more driven from out of country foreign investment, which isn't necessarily something we see here in Edmonton.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that Edmonton's actually a very self-sustained market. Like, we don't see the highs and the lows that some of the other big markets see. Our prices kind of always tend to stay very, similar. And even if there are ups and downs, it's a very minimal swing. And again, that's because people who are living here want to live here, right? And so, it's those buyers aren't buying from elsewhere and snapping up all these properties that, the local people need to purchase, right? There is a little bit, obviously, of investment from outside of the province and things. But again, we don't have that, demand of a, gorgeous mountains or gorgeous, ocean kind of thing.
Sure.
Where, it makes investments, very desirable. We have good jobs here. We have good people here. We have a very green city, lots of space, but we don't really have that really big attracting factor. And I think, that's kind of what's kept us a little bit under the radar for a long time. And now all of a sudden, our affordability is the kind of thing that, is really popping out to people. So again, that is obviously what is pushing up our prices and creating that demand. But, again, people got to also consider that real estate's a long-term investment. It's not, short term. So, if you are buying and worrying that, tomorrow your price is going to drop, it's possible it could happen, but, you got to think that this is more of a long-term goal. So, putting right strategies, I think, in place is also super important.
100%.
Where, if you are planning to only stay in a home for 5 years, maybe it's setting yourself up so that you can keep that property if the price does go down and you can go and purchase something else. If prices are lower at that time, your affordability might be a little bit higher, where you can, keep that original home, rent it out, build yourself some equity there, and then, move into your next home. People kind of sometimes can also get caught up in like, oh, I want to get into my first home and then I want to get into my dream home. But sometimes you got to kind of build your way there.
For sure.
And you take those steps and, build that equity over time. And I think that, that kind of would alleviate that stress where it's like, oh, well, what if I go to sell and, my price is lower kind of thing. You got to think a little bit ahead into the future and how that might look and how you can maybe avoid those issues.
For sure. I think similar to getting caught up in rates and prices, I think it's really easy, especially with media news, to caught up in what's going to happen right now or in the immediate future. But I think people just need to realize it's a long-term game. You should look at it. What is things going to look like for me in 5, 10, 15 years? And whether it's Edmonton's markets or even other Canadian cities, everything, will have corrections. It'll have some dips, but all in all, usually there's some pretty healthy growth. So I think if people just kind of keep that in mind, have the right tools and strategies like you're talking about, they'll do better for themselves.
Another fear that we tend to kind of run into is, I can't compete in this market. Obviously we've been talking about, that there is a high demand right now, and, you are going to be competing with other buyers for, different properties. I think one definitely thing that people can kind of do to alleviate this fear is, sometimes scale yourself back a little bit. Mm-hmm. I think that, people are they're getting their pre-approval done, they're finding out what their budget is, and they're trying to max that budget out, right? That's setting yourself up for failure right there. And the fact that, a lot of prices or a lot of homes are going over price as is. So, mm-hmm. If your budget's $350 and you're trying to tackle a house that's $350, you're never going to win that because you don't have any room to play with, right? So sometimes scaling back and kind of reassessing your needs and wants, I think, is a really important kind of strategy to go after. That can be tough because then people are like, oh, well, I can't get my dream home then, and I think that's, again, kind of goes back to our last point there, our last fear when we were chatting. Your dream home, nobody jumps into their dream home on their absolutely first property. The key, I think, for me is, get yourself in the market. That's how you're going to build yourself some equity. Take those steps to get to the property that you do truly love. And sometimes it does take that. Like I said before, you buy a property, you pay down your mortgage a little bit, build up that equity, and then you can maybe sell that or keep that as an investment property to kind of help, build and grow. And then over time, you go from one property to the next property. Maybe number 2 is your dream home. Maybe it takes 2 or 3 properties to get you to your dream home. But I think that people kind of just get caught up in the fact that, this home is something that I'm going to absolutely love and I need to stay in it for forever kind of thing.
Yeah, this is the home.
Yeah. And it's almost the same as people with jobs these days too. You know, nobody kind of finds a job and sticks to it the same way that, you know, the older generations do. It's, you know, sometimes it takes a couple of jobs to figure out what you truly love. And I think you can almost take that mentality into purchasing a home too, where, you know, you try a home out, you try something out. If it works for you, you know, you might stick along a little bit longer, plans might adjust. But I think, you know, if you do, you know, throw all your eggs in one basket right away, and then what if you're disappointed then kind of thing, right? And then, you know, it takes you a little bit longer to kind of get to that next property. So again, I think it jumps back into what our putting together a strategy for yourself and thinking into the future is definitely a big piece. Something
that I always like to tell buyers is, you know, like you're saying, why not grow with the market? You know, if you're sitting on the sidelines trying to wait for that dream home, you know, as we've talked about, prices are just continuing to increase. So why not increase with it, with that starter home, whatever that looks like. So then that way you can just get that much closer to that dream place. And something that we also find all the time is those people that do end up buying their dream homes are usually kind of funded by those places that kind of got their feet wet in the market in the first place. So, you know, getting started wherever that might be is going to be super crucial to kind of ending up in that dream situation.
And if you put all your money in on a property and kind of go too high on your budget, you don't want to leave yourself house poor is the other thing too, right?
Yeah, don't want that.
You know, you might own this big home and have no furniture in it because you're spending all your money on your monthly payments. Or, you know, you might be the type of person that likes to travel. Like, is that something you want to sacrifice just because you wanted your dream home? You know, take your time. Like, it's not a race. You know, you're not competing with anybody else. You'll get to where you need to be, you know, when it's meant to be, and taking those steps along the way, I think is definitely important, and will definitely help you maybe even get to where you want to be faster if you take a little bit of time off the start.
For sure. Yeah. I find that's another great point is just remembering that it's going to take some time, right? Like nothing's going to happen immediately. At least if you get your feet in now, you can grow with that market. So then that way it just puts you that much closer. And like you're saying too, you don't want to bite off more than you can chew, because that's not really going to help you either. It's going to kind of be a hindrance more than anything. And you also kind of have to take into account your lifestyle too. You don't want to absolutely press yourself for cash just because you wanted to get your feet in the market, because that's not really winning either.
Absolutely.
And speaking of winning, I think another thing that we really hear all the time is people think that they just can't compete. You know, there's a lot of demand, not enough inventory, and they think I'm not going to be able to get that house. But I find that a lot of the time, it's really people that just aren't aligned properly and they don't have those ducks in a row. You know, we talk about pre-approvals, we talk about having that game plan, you know, really deciding what's a need, what's a want, deciding that, you know, maybe I'm a pre-approved for 400,000, but I can't go right up to that 400,000 because I got to have that wiggle room to play with. The point is there's lots of different factors that come into play with winning in a multiple offer, and it's not necessarily just price. And, you know, having that game plan, knowing what that looks like, and having everything dialed and ready to go before you're even out there looking at stuff goes such a long ways. And I find firsthand the ones that are dialed in and the ones that are ready to go are usually the ones that beat out the ones that maybe are just trying to find something and don't even have square one taken care of.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And honestly, like we do actually have a video out that, you know, goes through kind of the steps on, you know, how to win in a multiple offer. And we talk about how, you know, price, you know, obviously does help, you know, is definitely kind of the main factor, but yes. Again, both of us have had people, you know, win when they're not the top offer kind of thing. Right. So, you know, structuring things like possession date, deposits, conditions, cleaning things up like that. I think that is definitely an easy way to, you know, help put your best foot forward and give you the best opportunity. And so, you know, I think that getting caught up in the price isn't necessarily, you know, something that needs to be done. And again, putting that strategy in place is going to, you know, help you whether you have the highest price or not.
A fear we've already touched base on today is, what if I buy that house and those rates drop? You know, when you hear buyers say that, what do you have to say to them?
I think the biggest piece there is having an education around it. You know, there's constantly lots of talk, especially these days in the media and in the news about, you know, what's happening with the rates. You know, the Bank of Canada is touching base, updating people on kind of where numbers are at with our economy. And so I think if you have a little bit of a knowledge around that, then you can kind of plan, you know, accordingly. Again, going back to strategy here, if there's potential that the rate's going to drop, you can maybe, you know, grab a variable rate, you know, with an option of locking in later, so that, you know, if rates start to rise again, then you have an option to, you know, hold your rate at a lower rate, you know, if there is plans that it'll go up quite a bit further. So I think that, again, you know, having a little bit of an education, and if that's something that you're, you know, maybe not knowledgeable about, or you don't feel comfortable being knowledgeable about, I think that's where it's important to kind of, you know, interview some mortgage brokers, kind of get an understanding for somebody who might work well with you and can help you in that situation. You know, those guys have, you know, their finger on the pulse all the time on what's going on with our economy and where rates may be going. So, you know, obviously none of us have a crystal ball, but at the same time, if they do have a bit of an understanding of, you know, what might be happening, again, you can kind of put that proper plan together in, you know, what might be the best option for you. You know, is it a fixed rate? Because, you know, you don't want to worry about your payments fluctuating. You know, you're okay with where the rate is at right now. Or, you know, you're concerned that it's a little bit higher, but, you know, there is things pointing to the fact that it might be coming down a little bit. So starting with a variable rate may be the way to go. Just knowing that there's options to, you know, adjust your plan as time goes on.
For sure. I think something you really hit on there is a good mortgage broker will be able to kind of analyze your situation and then put together the best plan possible. So they'll be able to really piece together, you know, what's currently happening, where things are going, and be able to steer you in that right direction.
100%.
And then speaking of which, you know, we always like to keep people updated on our rates too. So if you follow This Is Edmonton, you can keep yourself in the know that way. Ultimately, no matter the fear, having that right strategy and plan goes such a long ways in today's market. And if you're looking for a more personalized plan, feel free to call me and Brent, because we'd love to sit down and chat about what that needs to look like for you. If you're looking to stay informed in today's market, hit that subscribe button, turn on that notification bell, and keep yourself in the loop on Edmonton's fast-paced market. And hey, if there's any fears that you think we missed, drop them in the comments below, and we'd love to pick them apart further. I'll see you in the next one.